We're recording. Again, my name is Allison. I'm going to stop sharing my screen as well. Welcome to our session on virtual programming during the age of COVID-19. So back to what I was saying. Next week, if you have thoughts or ideas about topics that you want to know more about, please shoot me an email. One thing I know there's a lot of questions around, and it will certainly come up today, I'm sure, is some of the more technical aspects of doing virtual programming. What kind of free video editing software is out there and how do I use it, that kind of thing. So that's certainly one area I'm gonna try and explore and put together a program for in the coming weeks. Certainly feel free to ask those questions today, but we may not be able to get too far in the weeds on all of that. So if you have ideas, shoot me an email. I also wanted to give you all an update on reopening, because I know that there's lots of questions about that. As you hopefully heard, our statewide reopening proposal for the museum sector went to the governor's office last Friday, I believe. Oh, time, what's time? And we are waiting for word on whether that plan has been accepted, which will sort of allow museums to move forward with reopening. As soon as that plan gets sort of blessed, I guess, a couple of agencies have been working on toolkits to help museums and cultural organizations plan for reopening, the kind of nuts and bolts to go along with these guidelines. For Culture is going deep and broad, and they're putting together a really exceptional toolkit that will include things like signage, PDFs of signs about wearing masks and social distancing that you can download in multiple languages that you can literally just print and hang. I am focusing my efforts on helping smaller museums kind of reopen and what tools they might need. So you might not be able to purchase a fancy plexiglass sneeze guard for your front desk, but I've got lots of videos and plans to make your own for pretty cheap. So those are the sorts of things that I'm going to be including in kind of a compendium to go along with all of the other resources that will be coming out. So again, if you have specific questions or concerns around reopening and want to make sure that I'm addressing them in this toolkit, by all means, shoot me an email. That's would be incredibly helpful. The only other thing I'd ask for you to do next week or in the next few weeks, we are still in the midst of our statewide heritage census, our project to collect data on every heritage organization in the state of Washington. Mostly, I'm curious to know how many there are. So we're kind of in the midst of that. Of course, the timing is very odd. So we would ask that you complete that survey if you haven't already. Len just threw it up in the chat, and I will certainly include the link in my follow-up. Just have one person from your organization complete that based on 2019 data. So what did your organization look like in a typical year before COVID-19? And I know none of us can even remember a time before COVID-19, but the hope is that we can kind of get a snapshot of where the industry was prior to this economic and public health crisis. And then there's already a lot of sort of impact surveys out there that will give us a sense of how your organizations have been affected. But without kind of knowing the starting point, it's not as helpful to know the impact. So we've had great participation so far, but I would really love to get more surveys in. We'll probably have that survey open through the end of the summer. So you don't have to do it today, you can, but if you do it next week, that's just fine too. So a few words about how this is going to work today. Everybody except for our presenters will stay on mute. I'll introduce them in a second, one at a time. We have 3 folks here with us today. They'll each speak for about 5 or 10 minutes. And then as soon as questions pop in your mind, as they're talking right this very second, throw them in that chat, and Len and I will be keeping an eye on the chat, and as soon as we open it up for Q&A, I'll start pulling questions from the chat and directing those to our presenters. The chat is also the place where I hope that you will share ideas about what virtual programming you're doing and what's worked well for you. these wonderful 3 museum professionals have been doing great work in this area, but we know a lot of people have been. And so if you've got something that you think it would be helpful for everybody to hear a little bit more about, please share it in that chat. That would be great. I think that's it for me. I've talked a lot. So I am going to kick this off by sending it over to my colleague, Molly Wilmoth, who is the lead programs manager at the Washington State History Museum. And she'll sort of get us started, and then we'll hear from Tara, and then we'll hear from Michael. So Molly, take it away.
Thanks, Allison. So like Allison, I'm starting my timer. I'm gonna be good. I'm lead programs manager at the Washington State Historical Society. So that means I oversee our work with public programs, educational programs, and local outreach programs. And back when all of this started, we decided we needed to remind people that we still existed, and we were going to do some of that through virtual programming. And so we jumped right in, and thank goodness Len is here for this program today, because it's basically been the 2 of us trying to figure it out. And the place where we started was just, I mean, we all kind of get ideas from each other. So that was exactly what we did. We looked around and found the people that were doing things that we were really excited about. And then we just asked them, like, how do you do it? And it's really intimidating when the answers involve, you know, like having this major software, or like having these contractors that we pay all of this for, which you're like, we can't do that. But they were really great about giving different advice. And Len and I just approached it by trying it, which I think that's the best thing that we all have going for us right now, is everyone knows that we're all trying new things, and everyone is just like very nice about it. So our very first program that we did, we made sure that we kept it in-house before we kind of like invited our partners or other presenters. So we kind of, you know, we're our own guinea pigs, and then we expanded from there. But we decided to make this kind of a whole campaign. So we call all of our virtual programming the Washington State Home Society. So it's still WSHS, kind of like Washington State Historical Society. And then we started promoting it on Facebook, which is where we have most of our virtual followers. So that was kind of like where we decided to focus all of our energy. We also decided that we kind of like took a step back and thought about like, who are our audiences and what do they need right now? I know for one that I super enjoyed the escapism of virtual programming that some of these other organizations were offering, but that were still connected to mission. So the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry, for example, was offering a program series that they were able to really easily adapt from in-person to virtual, and they started calling it their virtual science pubs. So for example, they had a science pub that was all about cats. So they were talking about the science of cats and like, who are these felines that live in people's houses and what can we learn about them? And they had this woman from one of the Oregon universities talk about all of her research related to that. And it was just like so much fun. It was related to their mission, and it was something that they had already developed an audience for. So that was something that we looked at when we were deciding what programs we were going to move forward. So we adapted something that was really successful on the ground that we thought we could translate nicely into a virtual format. After we put our poor head of collections through the ringer of like, we're gonna try this out on you first and talk about our collections, we moved on to doing something that was already had that cultivated audience. So History After Hours is a program that we do quarterly at the Washington State History Museum that's like drinking while hanging out at the museum and learning local history, local and state history. So we're like, we can do that virtually. So we reached out to a historian that specifically talks about like alcohol and its relationship to culture in the United States. And she talked about whiskey in the Pacific Northwest and actually did a whole like mixology class. So she made whiskey sours, and we had really great attendance because we focused it on an audience that we had already developed, which I think was a great way to kind of kick off our virtual programming series. People started sharing it and started paying attention to it. And I'm going to show you a few different materials with the few minutes I have left so you can kind of get a sense of our approach. And I'll give all of these to Allison too, so you can kind of look through them. But one thing that we decided to put together, and you'll see, you know, Len at the beginning of this program, like shared the census link, right? Like as Allison was talking about it. So what we realized in all of our programming was we wanted to put together kind of like a run of show document. So we knew everything that was happening, what our goals were, like who our audience is. So this was from that program I was just describing, our History After Hours at home instead of at the museum program. But it outlines all of our objectives about like, what are we really hoping to achieve by having this as a virtual program? And then it jumps into that outline, like who's saying what, who's doing what. It includes all of the different links that we wanted to make sure that Len was sharing at different moments within the chat so people had easy access. And this is kind of developed over time. Again, this was like our second program, the first one that we did with another person outside of our organization. So that was kind of our first attempt. Let's see. Then we developed a cutesy little logo, which you don't necessarily need this, but having the brand has been something that's been kind of an interesting component for us. We're looking at continuing virtual programming for quite a while after, even when we're in person, because we realize that we're supposed to be serving the entire state, which how often do we really do that with some of our programming? So we're going to keep the Washington State Home Society as one of our ongoing virtual branded programs. But one thing that we like to do is make sure that when we start the program, we make sure to say this is part of an ongoing series. Like be sure that you're following for all of our other virtual programs, and we give that link immediately. Like make sure you follow on our Facebook page, you can follow on our website. And then we've also been asking for donations. What a novel idea. But we've actually gotten a fair amount of donations too. We're trying out just like suggesting like any amount is totally fine. We haven't put a specific amount on it, but there's all sorts of different versions of how you could approach that. But it's honestly been really fun to get the feedback through the donation as well, because we say like, just put in a little note about like, what program you attended, and then we'll know what to look for next time. And honestly, that's been like very reassuring that like we're hitting the audiences that we normally serve, but we're also pulling in people from around the state that we don't normally see, or even people from other states. I think we had someone attend from Kentucky. Was that right, Len? Oh my gosh. And he just was like, I want to be a member. You guys are doing great things. And so really what we've learned from this whole process is this is a great opportunity to reach out to people that we never even knew that we could be interacting with through mission-focused programming. So to date, we've done 7 virtual programs as part of the Washington State Home Society series. We have one tonight that's also going to be about suffrage history and collaging. So it kind of combines both history and then like a fun activity that you can do. And I think one of the most important things that we focused on is it's great to utilize our partners. Any way that you can build on partnerships that you already have brings in additional audiences and also kind of like keeps your connections strong. So we're continuing to work with McMinimans, who we presented history pubs at the Elks Temple there in Tacoma. And now we're able to do it virtually. So we're just able to spread that out to more audiences. We were able to finally, our friends over at Washington State Parks, we've been trying to figure out how we can do a program with them for a long time. We work with them in all sorts of different capacities. And then they were able to come to us and say like, oh, you're doing virtual programming. Do you want to help us host this thing? And I was like, yes, we finally are able to do this program together. And it only took a global pandemic for us to be able to do that. Let's see. And then really quickly, the last thing I will share, and I'll send these things out to you, but Len and I have been able to kind of put together a tip sheet for organizations of how to do, and the format that we use, and we can talk more about this if you're interested. We like to go from Zoom and stream to Facebook Live. So contained within Zoom is only our presenters, because I am terrified of getting Zoom bombed or having someone kind of like mess up that part of the presentation. And then we just stream directly to Facebook, which is kind of intimidating, but there's all sorts of reasons for why we approached it that way. So we have a whole tip sheet on how to approach specifically that type of program, and we'll send that out to you. And then we also developed a tip sheet for our presenters so that they know how they can be prepared for a virtual presentation. So I'll share all of those. And then I'll end with this monster, who for the first time in the last program decided to interrupt. But anyway, just thought it was fun to have a disapproving cat face on there. Thank you all, and please feel free to ask myself and Len questions when we get to that part of the program, because she's really the mastermind behind the technical side, which we'll talk about, I think, at a future program.
I don't know that everybody was able to see the disapproving cat face. You didn't scroll down, but I assure you it is spectacular, and brings up the point which we've discussed a lot, in that just audiences right now are very gracious. They understand we're all doing this for the first time or just figuring it out, and we're doing it from home, and cats and kids walk by, and and you know, I just really appreciate the generosity and kind spirit of our audiences, kind of with a lot of those funny and humorous and slightly distracting hiccups, for sure. So awesome. Thank you, Molly. Yeah, and I will share all of those documents with you all. I know that there are probably questions about what platforms we're using and why, and I'm sure that Michael and Tara can talk a little bit more about what platforms they're using. So I want to introduce Tara McCauley. She is the Director of Education at the Jefferson County Historical Society, and she's going to talk a little bit about what they've been working on.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Well, speaking of gracious audiences, I'm having this strange experience where my mic in Zoom keeps cutting out. So Allison, if suddenly you all can't hear me, if you'll just go like this,
yeah, I'll give you the sign.
And I can turn it back on. I don't know why it's happening. So
well, you sound fine right now, so fingers crossed.
Good, good. Yes, so hi everyone. I'm so happy to be here and share and learn today together. I work for the Jefferson County Historical Society. We are located in Port Townsend. We operate five sites, one museum, 2 historic houses, a research center, and a visitor center. During normal operations, we have 4 full-time staff and about 6 part-time staff. And at the onset of COVID, we reduced down to 3 full-time staff and 1 part-time staff. So running on a pretty lean staff as we sort of started to think about how to navigate engaging with and supporting our community during this time. And on top of that, I was brand new to my position was brand new to the organization, and I was brand new to the organization, and I was brand new to the community. So I had started in January. I came from the Burke Museum, so I was coming from a large organization. And so it was just all new. You know, it's all new for all of us, but it was sort of new on new on new on new. Kind of other things, I'll set the stage in terms of how we started thinking about this. We had really no precedent for digital engagement at all at our organization. It wasn't a way that we engaged with our community. We had never done any kind of virtual programming. We do have a Facebook account, but that's all we have in terms of social media. And thankfully, in February, we did a pretty big overhaul of our website, just going through, clicking through on every link, cleaning up things that were no longer active, kind of reorganizing. And so that was like a pretty solid tool as we moved into this. Our website was in pretty good shape. And so we started with 3 ideas, and we decided, okay, we're going to organize around these 3 ideas. The first was that we wanted to really highlight existing content that we already had that was already online, which it turned out was actually kind of a lot. We have a lot of online catalogs that you can search. We have a historic property search. We had some videos and like virtual tours that we had made. We had some PDFs, some great PDFs. We had some resource books that were online. And on the back end for us, we had Past Perfect that we could access digitally. So that was our second sort of guiding principle was, okay, we're gonna really think about focusing on highlighting collections. We can virtually access our collections during this time. So let's build something around that. And the third speaks to what Molly was talking about, which is a lot of people are doing great stuff. Let's connect our audiences with some of the great resources that people are doing elsewhere in the state and even in the country. And so we launched what has been our sort of programs thus far, which we call JCHS Comes to You. And we've been doing that all throughout April and May. And we would post twice a week. We posted on our Facebook account as well as on a dedicated page to our email. Every Tuesday we focused on something that was actionable or doable. So, you know, search this database, find these things in our collection, take this socially, you know, physically distanced walking tour. So things that were really active. And then on Fridays, we focused on collections. So did you know, can you help us solve this mystery? Take a poll of our creepiest dolls, things like that. So on Tuesdays, action, on Fridays, collections. And we had, you know, I'd say really varied success. Like some of our posts, we'd get like 2,000 folks engaging with us, and some of our posts we'd get 15. And because we didn't have a precedent for this kind of engagement, we're you know, all the questions we're asking ourselves are like, how are we measuring success? What were our goals? Is this good? Is it not good? How are we measuring that? And so with those questions in mind, and once we realized this is a space that we're going to need to be thinking about, this kind of virtual engagement, online engagement, we're going to need to be thinking about this for some time. You know, even as our county enters into phase 3, a lot of folks aren't going to be comfortable gathering. You know, Jefferson County has an older population who are in the vulnerable population. So we've been kind of throwing things against the wall, seeing what sticks. And we thought, okay, hold on, let's figure out really what our audiences are looking for and how they're feeling. So right now, what we've done is partner with 7 other organizations in the county. So the library, the Land Trust, the Marine Science Center, our arts organizations like Centrum and the Art School. And we're doing a big audience survey. So we wrote the same survey, and all of our organizations are sending it out to our constituents that ask these exact questions, right? How comfortable are folks feeling about gathering? When do they think they will feel comfortable? Is it about the phases in the Safe Start plan, or is it really about a vaccine? If folks are interested in virtual and online programming, what kinds? How comfortable are folks engaging in online programs and resources? Are there things that are limiting their ability to participate, whether that's actual equipment or access to internet or reliable internet or just overall comfort sort of using technology? If not in real life programs, and if not virtual programs, are there other resources that we could be providing for folks? Things that people could, you know, maybe kits, science kits or art kits, or things that we could send home with folks that they could then use, you know, kind of within their home, that are more tactile, right, more tangible. So we're in the process of that survey right now. When we get those results, I think that'll really help us as like an arts and culture community here in Jefferson County think about how we can really start to plan kind of long-term what kinds of programs we want to do. But I will say, so we have pivoted. We've made some changes to some of our ongoing programs. We have 2 series that we offer every year that we've decided to, for the rest of the year, move to an online platform. One is a lecture, First Friday lecture series, and the other is an archaeology class. It's an 8-session class. So we're moving those online. we're starting a program called History Happy Hours, where we're partnering with local bars and focusing on an era in time. The bartenders from the bars we're partnering with lead folks through a tutorial of making a cocktail and a non-alcoholic drink. And then we do like a 10 to 15 minute history presentation about that particular era while folks enjoy their beverage. And then I have Q&A at the end, and that's just hosted on Zoom. We're doing a series of videos for kids around collections and collection care and how to take care of all the different collections that you may have and or maybe adding to while you're spending time at home this summer. And I feel like there was one more thing. Oh, we are planning a handful of in-person programs outside for the summer. So we're doing some picnics in the yards and the gardens of our historic houses. We're doing a concert also outside in one of the lawns of our historic houses. And we're right now, if anyone has ideas, we'd love to hear them right now. We're thinking of using hula hoops to sort of designate areas on the lawn that are nice and far apart and help suggest to folks where they might position themselves to be 6 feet apart from others. So that's where we're at. That's what we're working on. And we probably have a lot of the same questions or grappling with a lot of the same questions that all of you are, which is, again, like, how are we measuring success? How do we balance the needs and wants of people who do want to get back together in sort of in real life, in person, and folks who maybe aren't comfortable doing that? And what does it look like to offer kind of a combination of those kinds of programs? We're all learning all of these technologies. I think I've been in maybe 3 Zoom meetings in my life before this, and this is our life now, right? This is how we convene. So learning curves for sure.
Yeah, that's great, Tara. I was really struck by what you said about sort of the ways which we had used our digital engagement prior to COVID. We definitely at the State History Museum found that each of our staff on our audience engagement team took a week and took over the social media just to give our social media person a break. And what I really realized in doing that is we had always used our social media as a marketing tool to really just push out information. But, you know, even some of y'all out there that share things frequently from your collections, and then people in the community comment that, oh, I recognize that place, or my grandpa, like, you're using your social media in a much more interactive way than we really had been. You know, people are used to thumbs upping and engaging, and we weren't soliciting any kind of interaction. And so then to kind of swing and all of a sudden, like, this is the only way we're interacting with our audience. I think people needed to get used to, like, engaging. I don't know. That was my experience. I think Molly had felt similarly. So yes, as much as we've been like learning all of this, you know, I think our audiences have too, and sort of learning what we hope and expect and want from them. So yeah, I love all of the ideas you mentioned. I don't have any better idea than hula hoops, but it made me think of those of you who were in the small historic house museum reopening program, and John Larson was talking about the tailgating party he's planning for the Polson Museum along with their, you know, small town teams exhibit. So I just think there are so many wonderful and creative ideas coming out of the challenges of this time. It's pretty awesome. You also mentioned something that I think could be something really to consider for folks. There are pre-recorded programs that you kind of pre-record and then make available via your digital channels. And then there's live programming, and those are 2 options. And one might, it might just work a lot better for your organization if you're small and the idea of doing something live and navigating that technology makes you really nervous. Start off with something that's pre-recorded where you can kind of control the conditions a little bit better, or you can stop and redo it if your speaker messes up or you forget to hit record or whatever. And that's, I think, a really great place to start. And then the other thing that's awesome is all of these programs will live on, right? I mean, they live on your Facebook page. All of these recordings, I should have mentioned earlier, I'm planning to archive all the recordings of these sessions, probably on YouTube when I get a chance to, just so that they can live there if you ever want to go back and reference them, which is pretty pretty awesome too. Great. Well, thank you so much, Tara. I want to now send it over to Michael King, who is also new. I think you guys had a similar experience in the timing of all of this. The new executive director at the Log House Museum, which is part of the Southwest Seattle Historical Society. So, Michael,
Thank you, Allison. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, sounds
wonderful.
Great.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again for the opportunity, and thanks to everyone who's participating today. I'm really delighted to have the opportunity to share some of what we've learned at the Southwest Seattle Historical Society. And equally importantly, I'm looking forward to learning from all of you as well. As Allison mentioned, I started in my role at the Historical Society about 2.5 weeks before we closed to the public. So it was, the learning curve was pretty steep, but we've got a great team. We're a team of 3 full-time staff, and thankfully we've been able to maintain those staffing levels throughout this crisis. For those of you that might not be familiar with the Historical Society, we are a small but really dynamic organization that promotes local heritage across the Duwamish Peninsula in the Seattle area through a range of programs and other community initiatives. We also operate the Log House Museum, which, as its name suggests, is a small historic home. Prior to the outbreak of the pandemic, we hosted virtually no digital programming. Of course, we have had a social media presence, which has only been increased over the last several weeks and now months. And we're enjoying more visibility now than we ever have before as an organization, which is really exciting. For the most part, in terms of our public programming, we have been able to shift or pivot from our in-person experiences to a digital platform. And we've had a lot of successes worth celebrating, but there's certainly been some challenges along the way as well. So for instance, we host a monthly speaker series. It's called Words, Writers, and Southwest Stories, during which we have a historian or author come and talk about a range of issues and themes related to our service area. And this series has really been a cornerstone of our programmatic calendar, and it's a longtime favorite among our established audience, as well as our new audiences as well. So when the pandemic changed everything, we, of course, decided to close the museum as quickly as possible. However, that decision was made on the same day that we were going to be hosting one of those presentations. So we had to act really, really quickly. And we decided to cancel that particular iteration in the series. And what we did is we reposted a previously recorded presentation from a series that we had hosted about 3 years prior. And what our curatorial team did was they also released some photographs related to the theme of the talk that had not been publicly displayed before. So in essence, that was it was a great opportunity to revisit some material we already had, but in terms of kind of the practical reality, it was a bit of a Band-Aid for us to buy some time to develop a plan for the months ahead. And we knew, we have to actively engage our audiences. We don't want to just show them things they've potentially already seen before. So we decided very quickly thereafter that we were going to invest in a Zoom account. We're all utilizing it, so we're all familiar with its capabilities, and we thought it was perfect in terms of what it could offer us and the price tag as well. So after we made that investment, we decided that we'd host live presentations moving forward, and we have moved forward with all of the presentations we had scheduled earlier in the year. We have been prioritizing, though, really prioritizing doing test runs with each of our speakers about a week before our presentation. That may seem really obvious, but as we learn how to manage these types of presentations, particularly the Q&A, it was the first time for a lot of our staff, or all of our staff, doing that. And we found that the same is true for our featured speakers, and it's a great opportunity to just make sure everything is in good order. So we've really benefited from that. We've hosted several of these presentations since we've closed now, and we've found that they've actually been able, they've allowed us to accommodate a larger audience than we would have been able to accommodate in person. Given the space limitations at the Log House Museum, we can really only fit about 25 to 30 people for a presentation or lecture. And we've been averaging between 35, 45, sometimes more, sometimes a little less for our digital lectures and presentations. So it's really nice to know that we can, we don't have to turn people away that we may have had to if they came in person. Additionally, we've been adding some entirely new programs to our programmatic calendar that we had not scheduled prior to the pandemic. We have a tremendous curatorial team. They're just so impressive. And what they've done is they've developed a series of workshops that address kind of practical knowledge or skills that our audience can utilize while quarantined at home. So for example, we've been hosting a series about preserving photos, family photos or historic photos that you might have. We have one of those sessions this evening, if any of you are interested in checking that out. Attendance has been really strong, and audience engagement has been very impressive as well. So we're really quite excited about that and intend to utilize or host more of those workshops moving forward. One small wrinkle that we've come across, though, as we've shifted towards this entirely digital model, is that we require our participants to pre-register, because what we do is we email them a Zoom link and password to avoid, or at least ideally to avoid any kind of Zoom bombing situation. That's pretty new for us. Our established audience, at least, is familiar to just kind of walking up on the day of a program and showing up. And so we've found that for many of our presentations, we get a lot of emails or calls at the 11th hour saying, like, where do I find the link? Where do I find the link? Or so what we've been trying to prioritize is, again, just publicizing that change a bit more and being a lot more active and visible in that sense. I also wanted to take a quick moment just to touch on the fact that prior to the pandemic, just about all of our programs were free, and we have now shifted towards utilizing a pay-what-you-can model. The realities of the financial challenges that the pandemic has created for us just necessitate that we think creatively about how we can generate a little more revenue. So what we've been doing is suggesting a $5 or $10 contribution. It's not required. Folks can still access the programming for free, but we have been just so thrilled by the response. Roughly 95% of our program participants have made a contribution of some kind, and we have been amazed to see that the average gift is just about $10. Some people have given far more than that, but again, we're just grateful that we have an opportunity to empower our audience to support us in a way they didn't necessarily have before, but it also ensures that our programming is still accessible and folks can participate even if they don't have the ability to give at this point in time. And the revenue that's been generated, again, it's exceeded our expectations nearly twofold. So we're really excited about that. And looking ahead, we're going to use a similar model for all of our programs for the foreseeable future. We are planning to host digital programming at least through September, if not longer, depending on the recommendations of our public health officials. Among these are a home tour that we're going to host in August. It's an annual event. It's a major event on our programmatic calendar. And so what we're going to do is we've pre-recorded some videos. We have a volunteer with a 360-degree camera who's gone into the space and taken photos. We'll utilize some audio tracks, and we think it'll provide us with the ability to produce a really compelling, engaging experience that folks can enjoy from the comfort and safety of their own homes. So yeah, really excited about that, and looking forward to the future, despite all of the uncertainty. So I'll end it there, but again, I'm happy to address any questions that you have, and of course, I'm eager to learn from all of you as well. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I think especially your experience with that sort of pay what you can model is, I think, exciting and heartening for folks. And I would, of course, recommend that everybody register and attend the workshop this evening. Even if you can't, click the registration link and look at the kind of language that they use in that suggestion. And I think there's like a $5, a $10, and then kind of a blank where you can fill in a donation amount. That blank is really key, right? Because some people will be moved to donate more. So yeah, that's really exciting stuff. I also want to go out on a limb here and suggest that none of our organizations could afford to pony up for the really expensive Zoom package. I'm pretty sure we're all working on the standard package, which is $14.99 a month. Probably taxes on that, so round it up. You know, the more advanced package allows you to do webinars and things, and annually will run you about $1,500 a year. But this $14.99 a month package allows you up to 100 participants. And then, of course, Molly has figured out how to stream from the Zoom to the Facebook Live, which makes it kind of a limitless attendance. And we've had more than that on some of our calls. So these are kind of the like nuances of all this stuff that we're learning and the kind of platforms. And I would definitely encourage you, if you're looking into this and have questions, you can reach out directly to Zoom, although I think both Molly and I had the experience of waiting several weeks for an email response. I just think everybody was bombarding them with questions at the same time. But I'm happy to kind of field those questions as best I can, and then certainly, try and toss those questions to people who know more than I do. So yeah, okay, so we're starting to get some questions. And this is a good one, and I suspect it might be different. There are probably two parts to this question. Just asking about what kind of equipment people are using for programming and recording programs. I know lots of people are just using phones and that kind of thing. If it's in terms of like a Zoom presentation where you have a presenter, I know that Molly has toyed around with the idea of like shipping microphones and things to people. I don't know. I'm going to let Molly talk about this one because I know she's in the midst of thinking about this, but you can't really necessarily control the quality of the presenter's home equipment, but you can give them tips like Molly kind of shared with you all about how to navigate that. So anything else you want to say about that, Molly?
That was basically it. Len and I have been, like, when we're doing programs, I'm just on my laptop, that built-in visual and audio, so not very high tech, but Len did some research so that we just had kind of like a list of different cheaper to like mid-range tools that seem to work pretty well. So we provide that list, and then Len, the thing I added was the disclaimer, like, we don't recommend these things explicitly, but like, here's some ideas of things that you can use. So those will be included on the documents that we send along. But it's really nice to just have some basic tips about like, check your lighting, like test out your audio. And then like we were just saying, everyone has kind of learned like, oh, it's really good to practice with your presenters beforehand, make sure all the tech is there, and then just have them kind of like walk through like roughly about the same time, make sure the lighting's good, make sure all of that stuff is in line. You'll be amazed what you can do with very little. Like, the more important thing is that the content is really engaging and that it's highlighting things about your organization and your presenter that you want to get across. So
yeah, and I think like if you only have a choice between decent audio or decent video, probably the audio is important. People very quickly get frustrated if they can't hear a presenter, and have a little bit more forgiveness for maybe a slow video. Yeah. And also for, and maybe this is a question for you, Michael, there are a couple questions about the home tour you have planned. So I guess we'd be curious to know, you said that you had a kind of professional person come in and pre-record some of that stuff?
So it was actually a volunteer. We're very fortunate to have a really robust volunteer cohort. And one of our volunteers is very, very tech savvy. He's really interested in photography and videography. So he has 360-degree photography equipment. So had we not had that volunteer in our ranks, we would have had to think very creatively about how we're going to move forward with things. But that volunteer has offered to, do essentially all of the production as well for us. So they'll do a lot of the editing. Of course, our staff will be working quite closely to make sure everything is in good order. But we were very fortunate to have that skill set within our community already. And I'd encourage everyone participating today to think about, there's a lot of different skill sets out there, and this is a great opportunity for folks to utilize skill sets that they may not necessarily have a chance to implement or deploy in regular circumstances.
Yeah, that's great. How many houses are on the house tour? How many stops?
So it's one house, it's one home. It'll be the home of early Seattle settler Doc Maynard, which is located in Alki in West Seattle.
Cool, very cool. Molly's going to be there. She's excited. I do know that lots of folks are having success just using, if you're pre-recording something like a virtual tour or pre-recording a program, just using their phone or that kind of technology. The cameras have gotten so good on this stuff, and it's possible to get external mics. If you're doing sort of a presentation and filming somebody or filming yourself doing a presentation, I would always recommend getting a tripod. They're cheap, but that sort of solves a lot of problems for you and is one sort of simple piece of equipment that can make a big difference. So I know that there are lots of technical questions about like lavalier mics and external mics and USB mics and all that kind of stuff. And we'll try and collect some resources around that with all different price points, because we know a lot of museums don't have the resources to really invest in top of the line stuff. So what's kind of decent, but something that I can afford. This is maybe a question for Tara. Shannon was wondering if you had any advice for museums that are kind of just starting out with their digital footprint, which it sort of sounds like you guys had kind of one foot in the door, but a long way to go in that area. So any tips specifically, or?
Yeah. Well, I think for us, starting with what resources we knew we had was a really good place to start. Knowing that we didn't have the capacity to produce a lot of new digital content, knowing that, speaking of dogs, knowing that folks weren't necessarily looking for digital content from us as much as they maybe were from the Washington State Historical Society or other larger, maybe more established in that digital realm museums. And so starting with what you have, really thinking about how to highlight what you have. We announced, to all of our constituents that we were going to be launching this and to look for it. So we did a big e-news kind of kicking it off. I agree with Molly that branding the project has been really helpful for us. So it becomes kind of a programmatic initiative in and of itself with a name that you can kind of refer back to. That's off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's great. I'll just share some insight in that sort of start with what you have is terrific advice, because I know all of the museums that are on the call today have really compelling stuff in their collections and their exhibits. In our little social, Molly has heard this story before, some of you maybe also, in our social media takeover, this was maybe week 2 or 3 of the quarantine and my kids were driving me crazy. So we spent a week building a model of the Washington State History Museum out of Legos, and we spent so much time on this and made this video, and it was a lot of fun. But when I was sharing things over the course of that week, I assumed that would be the most popular post. It was with my family and friends who all loved it, but it was a photograph from our collection of Ezra Meeker, of the Meeker wagon that he took across in, I don't know, Holly's on the call, she's probably going to correct me, 1910, I think. So we have the actual wagon in our collection. I sort of talked about how this is the biggest object in our collection, and then I did the smallest object in our collection thing. And then we have a photograph, a historic photograph in our collection of Ezra standing next to this wagon. people freaking loved it, right? They love seeing those things. I know a lot of museums that have done sort of then and now, taken historic photographs of street corners and things from their collection, and then walked out and taken a picture today, you know, and put those next, and people just get really excited about seeing their communities through time. Any stories that you have about kind of resilience in your community, and how your community has navigated challenges in the past. And this is just stuff that you know, because this is what you do, right, is collect these stories. And it's a great place to start, I think. Really good advice, Tara, yeah. Yay, and I was right, 1910, thanks, Holly. I also do, you know, back many weeks ago, we had Elisa, who's our Suffrage Centennial Coordinator, do a session or participate in one of these sessions on social media and just sort of strategies for really getting started in social media. And it might be worth inviting her back for kind of a more nuts and bolts how-to, because she's figured a lot out that I haven't, or I figured out the hard way. Yeah.
If you watch our Suffrage Collage program this evening at 6 o'clock, she's going to share this like video that she created, and Len and I just saw it for the first time on Tuesday, and it's like, you're a miracle worker. And she's like, no, I'm just like patient with like the few tools that I have. And so she's a great person to connect with about those things.
I'm also going to share in the chat right now, I don't even know what to call it, but there is a website that is fee-based, but I believe it is now free for nonprofits, that helps you design really kind of nice looking Facebook posts, Facebook covers, Instagram posts. Yes, Canva. Yes, I'm going to call it an online design tool, and it's called Canva. So I think it's just Canva. So right. Last time I mentioned it, the love for Canva, it's like life-changing, because I am not a graphic designer, and I am sure that all of you find yourselves having to design and create newsletters and PowerPoint backgrounds, and now lots of social media. And this tool is like, it's basically like you now have a graphic designer on your staff. So for sure, definitely check that out. I think if you're, again, wanting to step up your social media game, it's a really, really awesome tool. I will be sure to send out the exact link in my follow-up email for sure. There, Len's got it, and I'll send it out. Yeah, canva.com. We could have figured that out. Anybody else have questions before we wrap it up? And of course, if you think of things later, you're always welcome to shoot me an email, and I can direct them to these folks. These are really opportunities to kind of plant seeds for ideas, and just be transparent about some of the thought processes of other museums. I also hope that you know that while all of the folks who spoke today are like paid museum professionals, this virtual programming is an area that I think is super accessible to museums of all sizes. You kind of just have to be brave, right? It's not going to cost you a lot of money. It's got the potential to grow your audience in really, really meaningful ways. But it requires a certain amount of risk taking. And like I said before, I think now's the time to do that, because people are very tolerant of things that go a little sideways, which they will too. I mean, I haven't been in a single program where people haven't started talking without unmuting themselves or whatever. It happens even in the most professionally produced digital programs, and that's just part of it, and people are patient. So yeah.
I also encourage people to just view it as an opportunity as well. Like, instead of, we've spent a lot of time like, how do we translate this? Is it good as a virtual program? And those types of questions. But we're kind of moving into the next phase of our virtual programming, where we're thinking about like things that we wouldn't have been able to do if it weren't virtual. So it's kind of like leveling up, right? Like, we have our In the Spirit Indigenous Arts Festival that's coming up, and we have like people that provide demonstrations on site, but we're hoping to be able to engage people like in additional programming where you can actually see Indigenous artists go out and gather the materials and then see them work in their own workshops, which like we can't do that if we're were on site at the History Museum. So work with what you have, but then also see the opportunity of like, this is our chance to like do this brand new thing. So much opportunity.
And don't forget what I think both Tara and Michael and Molly all mentioned, which is lean on partnerships that are already there for sure. So, this is the time to band together. I am wondering if Tara will share her survey with us maybe so I can send that out. I think audience surveys, and honestly, it can be as simple, this sounds like this is going to be a great tool for them to sort of figure out how to move forward, but it can also just be a poll, a Facebook poll, which I didn't know how to do before, a few months ago, and figured out how to do it. And, just asking one or two kind of questions. So there's lots of tools out there, but kind of knowing your audience and having a better sense of what they need in this uncertain time is going to be really instructive, I think. Is there anything else you want to say about that, Tara? Or
I'd be happy to share the survey, absolutely. And I think, again, we've been so fortunate to be able to partner with other organizations in the county to send the survey out so that we can think collaboratively about how to respond to those results. And I think, it's like Nina Simon says, like, without understanding what your audience wants and is looking for, it's like throwing a surprise party for someone that you've never met, right? Like you can guess at what their favorite kinds of cake and music and all of that is, but you can throw a better party if you know.
Absolutely. And just thinking about that kind of data, I'll just finish with reminding everybody, we talked about this a little bit earlier in the week as well. There's a lot of people collecting data on the public's kind of intent to return to cultural organizations and how comfortable they're going to feel and what it will take for them to feel comfortable. And the good news is that people seem ready to return to museums within the next few months, that they believe that they will feel safe in those spaces because they're not contained spaces, there's freedom of movement, even inside most museums. Again, historic house museums, as we've talked about, kind of sometimes can fit somewhat differently into this equation. But even given that, I think we're going to be relying heavily on virtual programming for some time and potentially forever, given the success that we're finding in connecting with audiences that can't physically get to our spaces. So any thinking you're doing around this topic is of value right now, and anything you're trying, like I love Jen said, just try, like Molly mentioned, and it might work and it might not, but you're going to know a whole lot more at the end of that program about how to approach the next one. And so yes, I would just encourage everybody to be brave, give it a try. I will follow up with y'all in the next few weeks with a program about some of the more technical stuff. You hear us talking about platforms and how do you connect your Zoom program to a live Facebook feed and all of that kind of stuff. And I know that Molly has learned some do's and don'ts around that, some lessons the hard way for sure for our team. But I know that there's lots of technical questions. So if you have those kinds of technical questions, email them to me so that I can make sure we find folks who can really speak to that specifically. So anybody else have anything they want to kind of chime in before we say goodbye? Thank you so much, Tara and Michael and Molly and Len. This has been a great conversation, and I really appreciate your generosity in sharing some of your experience on this. And everybody look for an email from me sometime later today or tomorrow with those links and everything, all right? So go forth and be brave.